I remember saving all that money, thinking about converting it into US dollars, finally making the decision to go down to the bank, fill in this form to have it wired to my brokerage account in the US, signing that final piece and watching it go. That was freaking scary. Hey guys, it's Sunmin and welcome back to Your Money Game. Now, this video is for those of you who have always feared the idea of investing, and I think it's something that's fairly normal, especially for those of us who've never thought about investing. Whether if you grew up in an environment or your household that never really talked about money, nobody in terms of your friends ever really came and talked to you about the potential of what investing could do. Now, if you're watching this, I'm going to assume that you're interested in investing, but besides the practical elements that might be holding you back, maybe you're still trying to save enough money to start, but maybe it's more psychological. You find yourself hesitating to take action, and so from what I've seen, there are three big reasons that tend to hold people back. So the first is that you have this feeling that investing is almost like gambling, and you're kind of afraid of losing money. The second big one is that some people tend to be confused and kind of overwhelmed by the complexity that's out there with regards to investing, and then they don't start. And then the third is people who kind of already have the idea that, yeah, I'm gonna get going, but for some reason or another, they've been procrastinating and they're putting off and then telling themselves that I'm gonna start at some later point in time. So let's talk about the fear of losing money. Now, one of the big reasons why people tend to develop that as a fear is that they either personally have went through a loss that created that fear, or they had a loved one who went through a really bad investing experience and then transferred that fear onto them. So on a personal note, I remember growing up where in my household, I think my parents invested in a unit trust. What they told me was that when they finally withdrew the money from that unit trust, it was actually less than the amount they actually put in. So this kind of created an environment of like, wow, investing is a pretty scary thing. And it's completely understandable because who wants to lose money? Now, to overcome this fear, I talked about it loosely in my first video about the game of money and why we need to take action. But if you are the type that are thinking that investing is like gambling, I'd like to introduce to you a new kind of way of thinking about it, which is the concept of thinking in terms of odds. So what I mean by this is that odds are like, what are the chances of something bad happening? If you, for example, were to flip a coin and you had to call heads or tails. So if you ask yourself, what is the chances of you getting it right? It's 50-50, right? So a lot of people tend to think of gambling as that it's a 50-50 chance. But there are some even more extreme scenarios. So say, for example, if you're the type that understands what going to the Toto, put down a series of numbers and hopefully will get you that big huge lump sum. So if you were to ask yourself, what are the odds of you winning that big jackpot? Odds are it's very low. But if you had to think about investing in terms of odds, if you asked yourself, if you invested in, say, a company that you're very familiar with or comfortable with, Microsoft, for example, odds are you're using one of their products. And if you invested money in a company like that, what are the chances or what are the odds of that company going bust? What are the odds of them going bankrupt and the money that you've invested in them becomes absolutely zero? Odds are it's not very high. You can choose different companies that are unlikely to go under or unlikely to result in you losing your money completely. What tends to be the result of you fearing of losing is that you want absolute certainty that you would lose zero money. So as a result of that mindset, what tends to happen is they take the money and you put it in a savings account. And in your head, you're thinking to yourself, it's 100% safety, it's 100% guarantee that it's not gonna disappear. So you might be right that the money that you put in a savings account won't actually disappear. The bank won't suddenly close overnight. But in my first video, I talked about the issue of inflation. And if you are putting money in at a 0.05%, the 3% annual inflation is gonna eat that up. So if you think again about it in terms of odds, what are the odds of you retaining the value of your money over a long period through a savings account? the odds are 100% that you're gonna lose value. There are many different investment options out there that are good odds of you not only having your money at the end of the day, but having it grow at a rate that is better than what inflation is going to do to your savings. Now, another way of overcoming this fear of losing is to think about it in terms of being afraid of shadows. Now, investing could be a little bit like this if you didn't really know what you're investing in or how much you're going to put in it. Now, the process of shining a light on that fear is actually really simple. It's having a piece of paper in front of you, or an Excel sheet if that's what you like, and breaking it down into 3 very simple columns. The first column is, what are your immediate needs? So money that you need to spend on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. The second column is money that you need in the near term. So what I mean by that is like you're saving for a wedding, you're saving for something big that's going to happen within a year or 2. And the third column is what you can comfortably say, I want to invest in for the long term. It's money that you're very comfortable to see parked away for 5 and maybe up to 10 years or even longer, ideally. So once you have those 3 columns laid out in front of you, you begin to see that, hey, I don't really need to be so fearful because I'm not putting all my money at risk. On to the second big thing that holds people back, and that is, I don't really know where to start because things are confusing. How do you pick a company? How do you pick an investment? There's so many different things out there that it can become very overwhelming very quickly. For most of us who've not started investing, there are these new type of companies that have mushroomed and are providing very interesting, easy to start services, and they're what they call robo-advisors. So why I favor robo-advisors when it comes to beginner investors is that it really makes things very simple. First of all, when it comes to thinking in odds and thinking in risk, they tend to have this sign-up process that when you're going through the different questions, it becomes an easy way for you to find the different type of risk profile that kind of suits you. The second thing is when it comes to the sign-up process, robo-advisors tend to be really easy. The sign-up process, at least in Singapore, tends to be almost like a few clicks, and then next thing you know, you've got an investment account ready. All you need to do is fund it. The third interesting thing is that when it comes to the cost of investing, let's face it, all investment vehicles tend to have a cost associated with it. Robo-advisors, for the platform they provide and the things they're willing to do for you, it tends to be done at a very reasonable amount of cost. So what's great about using a robo-investor to start is that you can begin to do it very simply, and it's like dipping your toe into the world of investing. And once your toe is in it, you're beginning to feel comfortable, your interest is growing, and you want to begin to learn how to do things yourself in different ways, then it becomes an easier kind of next step. So coming to the third and final big thing that tends to get in the way is the one that I consider the most insidious. It's because it gives you the illusion that you've actually taken action, but you've not committed to it. So it could be a situation where you're talking about it, you're thinking about it, you're reading about it, you might have even opened a brokerage account or opened an account with one of those robo-advisors, but you've not put money inside, or you put money in it, but you actually haven't committed it to a fund. Now, there can be a million reasons why we procrastinate, but it tends to fall in 2 broad buckets. The first is like some variation of I'm busy. The second is I've got some form of commitment that I'm already kind of tied to. Now, to cross this hurdle to investing, one very useful way of thinking about it is to imagine your life as a typical life arc. So what happens to a typical person as they grow up is that maybe you start working in your mid-20s, towards your late 20s, you meet somebody and you want to get married. If you get married, maybe in your early 30s, you're thinking, yep, I'm going to plan ahead for a kid. So then you've got that large expenditure as well. Then you've got your mid-30s towards late 30s and you're thinking about your child's education. And finally, you begin to wake up maybe in your mid-40s or so and thinking about yourself like, oh yeah, actually, maybe I should begin to plan for the long term for myself. I think the big problem is we tend to underestimate just how much energy, mental space, emotional space that we need to kind of like get off our butts to take action on a habit that we're already not very comfortable doing today. Or if you're already in those major milestones, it's thinking to yourself that right now I'm going to commit to taking action regardless of what happens in those different milestones. The other mental model that's useful to kind of like overcome that hurdle of starting at a later point is this idea of compounding. So imagine if you're in this situation. You have $1,000 and you are very comfortable committing $100 for the long term every month. Over 20 years, that $100 amount is going to add up to about $25,000. So that's with you just saving the money. You could be putting it under your mattress, and that's what you'll have. If you were to put it in a savings account that is a reasonable performing one, it gives you say a 2% return, that $25,000 would have changed to $30,000, 600 plus. If you were to put it in an investment that yielded you an 8% return, now over the long term, stock markets tend to perform at a roughly 8 to 10% return per annum, that $100 a month would have grown to $59,000 plus. Imagine instead of that 20 years, you had 15. Now this is quite normal. We all open accounts, we don't do anything, we put in a little bit of money, but we didn't really commit to a long-term plan. So if you ran the numbers and you only invested for 15 years at the very same $100 every month, you would have walked away with $35,700 plus dollars. So contrast that with $59,000 plus. So the difference is almost half. And it's just a matter of 5 years of not doing anything. So the cost of you not taking action today can really add up in the long term. One other perspective that not a lot of people talk about is the compound ability of us to grow skills. So if you're talking about a loss of opportunity, it's losing that opportunity to grow with familiarity, to grow the skill of investing if you don't start now. So one final story I'd like to share with you guys related to the idea of compounding your skill is inspired by the British cycling team in the Olympics in 2008. Now, prior to 2008, supposedly the British team had only won one Olympic gold. So at that point, what the country decided was to bring on this new head coach who had a very simple philosophy that if you made 1% improvements across a range of different things, all those things will add up. So the team was cycling better by 1%, they were eating better by 1%, sleeping better by 1%, working together better by 1%. And all those things added up cumulatively to result in them walking away with multiple gold medals in the 2008 Olympics. So what this means for us is that if we take the same principle and we make these little improvements in our investing game 1% at a time, all these small little things add up. And hopefully by the end of our investing lives, we walk away with our version of gold. To sum things up, I talked about the big 3 things that get in our way of investing, but more importantly, what can we do to overcome them? First of all, begin to think in terms of odds. Second of all, shine the light on some of your own finances. Begin to find that pocket of money that you're comfortable with investing for the long term. Thirdly, realize that there are many different investment options out there, and you'll be able to find one that kind of fits your risk profile so that when you invest in it for the long term, you're able to sleep at night. And finally, it's really important to take action now. Let compound interest work in your favor, not just from a money perspective, but let it work for you in terms of building that skill, building that familiarity, and becoming a good investor over the long term. So with that said, thanks for watching guys, I really appreciate it. If there are any other fears or barriers that come up in the way of investing, feel free to comment below and let's talk about it. And if you've gotten any value out of this, please feel free to give me a thumbs up, subscribe for more videos in the future, and share it with your friends who you think can get any value out of this. Thanks, and remember to play your own game.